Here we are again for the next session in this main court. I would like to introduce Diego Crijns. And Diego is the assessor at the Financial Action Task Force, basically the global money laundering and terrorist financing watchdog. He will share some examples of fraud in the digital age. So please be aware. Diego, the floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, a different type of workshop here at this moment. I was asked to talk with you about fraud, but then in the way how criminals influence, how they use you as corporates, as financial institutions in their frauds. I got a question from Sanders half a year ago, if I could tell you some examples here. Examples not from old cases, but from the cases of the future, the new ones. Or like we have heard in the first session, that they talked about the unknown unknowns. How do I know the unknown unknowns? So I asked them, why do you ask me? And they told me, we know that you write a lot already for many, many years about new crimes. And each time we see a new one. How do you get to those crimes? And I'll explain to you later. I have 40 years of experience in working against criminals. At this moment, I'm retired, and except from my retirement, I work together with 4 old colleagues, and together we have 160 years of experience in working with criminals. So we write a lot about the new criminal activities. But how we do it is in a different way. It's in the way that has to do something with this old tile we have here in the Netherlands. Met dieven vangt men dieven. So the first thing I did, here we also about talking about AI and using digital instruments. I asked AI if I have here an international group, how's it in other countries? Do you have the same language about this? Do they have the same things? And I can tell you, AI helped me to set a thief, catch a thief, and it's in French, in German, in Spanish. It even is in languages like Mandarin and Japanese, Korean, Hindi. You see, there's one language missing, and it really is. It's not in Russian. I don't know why, but maybe we can elaborate on it later on. And it's always a little bit in the same way. So what I'm going to do the next 40 minutes, is I'm going to try to make you a little bit a thief, think like a thief, how that thief, that financial thief, will use you as corporates, will use you as financial institutions in their criminal activities. Who am I? My name is Diego Crijns, like I said. I've been for more than 20 years an accountant and an inspector at the Dutch tax department. I'll come back to that, why an accountant is important, and also why tax information is important. Since, let's say, 2000, 2001, I worked for the field. And sorry for those from banks. Yes, I'm one responsible for the investigations. I worked at the Anti-Money Laundering Center, and my colleague, Ton Scholing, with whom I worked for many years, and I work now also here at DCPF, is also here present. I'm an author and a writer, and I work a lot at universities, I give lectures there. In 2015, the FATF came into my perspective. For those who don't know the FATF, if you have problems with our regulators here in the Netherlands, because they give you regulations on money laundering, terrorism financing, or proliferation. The reason is not that they thought about it. We heard already a lot about international organizations, that there's one organization behind it. That's the FATF. So if you have problems with all those regulations, I'm also to blame. I still work there, and I had the honor to visit a lot of very special countries. Nigeria, Moldova, and the UAE, for instance, which are, if you're talking about money laundering, special countries. At this moment, I'm retired, and not completely. I'm a judge at this moment at the appeal court in The Hague. And the only cases I do there are financial cases related to financial economical crime. So they use my experience. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to share some examples with you. And I'm really each time looking from the perspective of the criminal. But before we can talk about these cases, I have to do some discussion on what's financial crime and where does it come from. Since in 1925, let's say something like that, time of Al Capone, we're talking about money laundering. We're talking about geldwäsche, blanchiment d'argent in French. In the Netherlands, we say witwassen. And I always say to my colleagues, already many years ago, that maybe our term is far better. And where does it have to do with? What criminals do, it's not only for money with them. It's something different for them. It's for them, if they have criminal advantages, that they want to use them. And it's not only money, it's also other values. So what you see is from, let's say, the period from 1995 to 2005, we changed to value laundering. And in that way, I think witwassen is a better term to use. So they also used gold, diamonds, watches, these kind of things. So that was the evaluation from where we came from financial crime to what we now call financial economical crime. And of course, there are a lot of other things incorporated into economical crime. I'll come to that, like sanctions and things like that. We're going to give you some examples of that later on. But after 2025, the FATF had come into the international organizations, and they gave countries a lot of regulations. That meant that for criminals it was far more difficult to launder their money or launder their values. We had regulations on gold. We had regulations on diamonds and things like that. So criminals had to do something different. And what they did from 2015, let's say, the FATF really focused on trade-based money laundering. And it was, again, laundering, but it was laundering using other goods. And now, from financial institutions, value institutions, we go also to where we are here today with other corporates. Then they started using corporates for their laundering processes. So it had to do with all those strict regulations. So they had another way, I always say, they're an homo economicus, those criminals. They find the most economical way. How does it happen? You have criminal activities, let's say from drugs, you get the cash. From the cash, you transfer it into goods. And what you do in money laundering and things like that, you try to place it from one place to the other. So you transport it in containers or things like that. Again, you have those goods, and you try to sell those goods, and again, to money, or something you can use. But like I said, they're homo economicus. Each transaction costs money. And of course, they want to, at the end, they want to have as much as possible. So what criminals did, and that's what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about today about the new things they're using. And of course, I know everyone now asks me, so you're going to talk about virtual assets, new payment methods, new payment systems. But what you heard already before is that there is a lot of regulation coming and coming up also on these virtual assets. So I promised Sanders that I would really talk with you about the new ones. So, what are those new ones? If you would be a criminal and you would have money and not doing it by trade-based money laundering, which will cost you extra money and you need other parties to do, what would you think about? Is there something that is really as easy as money to use? I can give you an example. And now, one of the two most difficult things for somebody on stage will happen. I'm going to ask the technique whether they can show you a little film. I'm sorry, it's in Dutch.
Een normaal telefoongesprek met een duur nummer lijkt eenvoudig. Toch loopt de financiële afhandeling iets complexer. Internationale tussenpersonen handelen het af en krijgen hun percentage. Altijd zit er in het midden een grote telecomaanbieder met een technische en financiële dochter in een ander land. Wat speelde hier? 1 telefoonnummer belde voor kapitalen naar een callcenter. Dat moest gaan opvallen. Dus werden de nummers bij de eerste tussenvennootschap aangepast. Nu leek alles helemaal normaal. De gebelde seconden bleven gelijk. De tussenvennootschappen hielden een marktconform percentage aan. Bij het beursfonds intern en de verschillende externe toezichthouders viel het niet op. De seconden klopten en veel verschillende nummers. En de geldstroom liep via de financiële dochter in een ander land. De conclusie: een callcenter met keurige inkomsten via een beursfonds. Een goede zakenman werd slapend rijk. Maar er was een criminele organisatie. Had je te veel drugscash, dan leverde je het keurig af en werd het omgezet in telefoontegoed. Die je terugkreeg als omzet in een eigen callcenter. Je zwarte cash is weg en je hebt legitieme inkomsten.
And now the second most difficult moment, whether they can put the screen the right. Okay, thank you, technique. I'm going to explain. This was a case, really from a telephone company that came to us, and we discussed with them, and we did not understand in the beginning what was happening here. At the moment we stopped this case, we heard that they contacted each other and said, this costs us 250,000 euros a day. So their profit out of the money laundering was 250,000. They laundered more than 1 million every day through this construction. So what they did, very easy, the criminal money was transferred into something that's almost the same as money, telephone values. Those telephone values went through a system, a normal system, and of course they changed it because that's what financial criminals do. They change papers. And here in this case, the telephone accounts, they put a company in the middle. Did you hear what the company was? It was a stock company. It was a very, I'll come to that later, that's not a coincidence. It's on purpose that they did it. And I'll explain later why it is. And it ended at a person who had a pawn shop, who had a call center, or something like that. That was the real criminal, and he had legitimate income there. So a very easy way to change it. Now here you say, that's nice, Diego, but I'm not in the telephone world. So what do I have on this example? It was an example in how you can change it in a very easy way for money, into a different way, and that money was very easy there to transform. I'm going to talk about you with another example. This is from the Dutch Times, and I took this one because I then have the English version. And it's about a company licensing from the Dutch supermarket, the brand Spar. And in August 2022, the Dutch ambassador visited the Spar supermarket in Tehran, so Iran, promoted it as an example of successful business engagement with Iran. If anybody of you hears about Iran, I think you'll start thinking about sanctions. What does Spar have to do, a supermarket, with sanctions? This is the rest of the article. And what you saw is that including, I put a line under it, including import Western technology and granting Schengen visas to individuals tied to the regime there, the military police. So you saw that this normal company, international company, was used for sanctions evading. Say, but we were talking about money laundering and financial crime. I'll show you something else. If a criminal has an activity like this, in which he uses Spar was not aware of what was happening here, that they were just using them, their way of how they had supermarkets and things like that. But they did something else, that not only that the HP equipment, the computer servers and things like that went over there, but they did something else. And they introduced an S-payment or a voucher system. So it was very easy. If you, for instance, had a family member in Iran and you wanted to support them, that you could pay here in the Netherlands onto with a voucher system, and then your family in Iran could buy goods with it. If we're talking about sanctions evasion, it's also on money. So it was not only here, they did it for the goods, they did it for the computer equipment, but if we have a structure like that, why not use it also for different things? Why not also use it for money? They did it even better. At the end, what they did, you could also go with your voucher for the Spar shop to a bank and get money back there. So what we see, money, using a company, in this case Spar, with a normal system, a payment system, and you could get it back as money there. If this is not an easy way of evading these sanctions, I don't know yet. But now the question that security experts noted that such technology is unnecessary for a small grocery chain. If HP, in this case, they must have seen that there was something rotten there. There must be, that it's not normal that this equipment goes to Iran. Just the same as with this payment system, financial institutions were involved. They must have seen that there were payments made over there. And let's say that the bank in Iran, where you could return your vouchers and get your cash, that they were more or less involved in this construction. So that they did not report, I understand. But what you see is that, and what I want to emphasize on, and what we are using more and more as in our roles as in the police, that we are asking from corporates also to give us these kind of signals. Signals, there is computer going over there. There we see payment systems going over there. What could be behind that? And that question, because you see that they each time are looking for partners who can help them. But this question, if I would have asked you 4 minutes ago, when you saw only the header of this article, if you would have thought about criminal involvement of HP and banks in these systems, would you have thought, okay, there's something wrong there? I can tell you, if you're not, you're in good company, because, like I said in the beginning, the ambassador in the Netherlands, when 2 years before we detected this, went over there and said, it's a good example of cooperation. So that's what I've tried to emphasize on. That why did they use the Netherlands? Why did they use a company like Spar for this? Does anybody think about money laundering in the Netherlands? A company which has such high grades, if you're looking at the FATF standards, that's not high on the corruption index, that has strict regulations. So if you're a company in a respectable country, if you are a big international company which transfers money from one place to the other, because that's what criminals do. They don't want to do it in one country, because then detection is far too easy. So they need you as international companies. If you do these kind of international transactions, and a lot of these things, if you can check these boxes, I can promise you, you're the next company that they use. And if you're sure that you're not, challenge us, autonomy afterwards, and I'll guarantee you that I'll show you where your risks are. But what you need to do, and what we do in detecting these kind of cases, is that we each time start thinking from the case of the criminal, how they could use you. You remember I told you about, in the telephone case, there was a stock company in the middle. Why was that? Oh, sorry. I need to tell, but when you're so excited as I am to tell you these kind of examples, what I wanted to emphasize on is that in this case, you see that each time what criminals do, they keep on associating, they copycat. What we first did with money, we can do it with telephone, we can do it with vouchers, and different things. If you're in a company and you have also returns in your company, and I think most of the production companies here have returns, I can guarantee you, I'll use your system of returns for money laundering. So if you're sure that it will not happen with your company, I'll guarantee you, I can find a solution. I was talking about stock companies. Does anybody remember this company? I think everybody here knows. What was the crime we were talking about in this case? What did everybody focus on the first month? What was the first documentary? There are beautiful documentaries on Wirecard. But if you're looking at the first documentary, the documentary was on accounting fraud. Ton and I said in the beginning already, and we wrote an article after 2 months. This is not a fraud, an accounting fraud. And for us it's easy. Because, like I mentioned, I was an accountant at the tax department. If I looked at the Enron case, that was an accounting fraud. And you know where those special purpose entities they used for their tax crimes, where they were situated, you can imagine. They were here in the Netherlands. So we knew that case very well. We did Ahold as field. The Ahold case was really on accounting fraud. But Wirecard was different. So we started thinking, what could be behind this? A few months later, in December 2020, I published the article on Wirecard from a money laundering perspective. Yeah, that in April 2021, this article came out. Wirecard employees removed millions in cash using shopping bags. Ladies and gentlemen, a digital bank where cash money is coming in. There must have been red flags. Was that the hand rising or? Okay. Cash that could not have been there. And it's not that they just started doing it in 2020. It was already for 8 years going on. Come on, somebody should have seen this. But I talked about a stock company. Would anybody think about Wirecard as being involved in fraud, where they have an accountant, where also the stock authorities are looking at this company? What criminals do, they are really, like I said, you as international companies, you as stock-related companies, you can give them extra confidence that nobody will suspect that transactions going through your companies, that have to do something with criminality. So that's why stock companies, are really a target for them. If I can use a stock company as a criminal, I do. Did anybody have an idea how Wirecard came on the Deutsche Börse, how they became a stock company? Not through the normal system. If you want to go to the stock, if you want to go there, you will be checked very thoroughly. They did not. What they did a merger with a very small existing stock company. In that way, they were already on the market, also on the small market, and from the small market they went to the bigger market, and to the bigger market, and at the end, their volume, the value of their shares was more than the complete value of Deutsche Bank was. So it was enormous. Did they also do some accounting fraud? Yes, of course. We all know that there was a lot of money missing there. Anybody an idea? That money that was missing, that should have been in the Philippines, and that was at a company in the UAE. Where did they get those profits from? What kind of transactions were they? I can tell you they were exactly the same as I showed you in the case of the telecom fraud. Porn, gambling, and these kind of shops. So an easy way to get a lot of profit there. We are almost sure, and of course everything is missing, that a lot of data is missing. We are almost sure that exactly the same structure was behind it. So what I showed you, what I tried to show, is how they copycat things. Okay, and here they set it up for more than 10 years. That criminals, financial criminals, have the time. And if the profit is, like I mentioned in that other case, 250,000 euros a day in profit, I don't know what company here has a profit of 250,000 euros a day. I think there are not very many of us who work at a company where they have those kind of profits. Ladies and gentlemen, when we were here this morning, there was one thing that was also mentioned. Looking at the future, the question was, looking at the future, what's changing? The public, society, expects more from you as companies and also from financial institutions when we're talking about environment, people, people, and that we labor, child labor, and things like that. I can promise you one thing. If there is one thing coming up, the next year, which will be where criminality is very important, it has something to do with carbon rights. And it's easy to say that because I'm now at this moment with two journalists, one from France and one from the Financial Times, talking about how carbon rights are used for money laundering. But I'll go a little bit back. This is a picture from the film Lord of Scams, and it has something to do with a scam on carbon rights. It's already from a few years ago, that it really was. And have a look, these are the prices, which the red square is on now. These are the prices of what was paid for carbon rights. So if you see a market going like this, is this normal? I think that everybody who has something to do with carbon rights, whether you're a buyer or a seller, it should raise suspicion. There is something going on here. This is not normal. And of course, like it says here, it's in Dutch, so I translated it. Trade platforms for 80 or even 90% were corrupt. These prices were really influenced. They were influenced for, in this case, the crime group. This crime group said 283 million, but we had a lot of costs. So that's their way of talking about, we're working so hard and we have to give big parties and things like that, so that we earn a lot. These were the earnings they had, 283 million. The fact that it's not only me talking to these investigative journalists, this is from El País. So you say I try to take examples from all over the world. Here an Interpol agent says carbon trading has become an easy target for organized crime. If I would like to transfer money from one place to the other and influence these prices, I would use carbon rights. Okay, you say, but I'm not in a company where carbon rights are involved. Okay, copycat, you get another example. If there is somebody in oil, what happens, and this is also a case really from reality, which I got from my colleagues, that we all know that when oil goes onto a tanker, it has in between 30 days, let's say, if it goes from one place to the other. What we see is that during those 30 days, it's transferred very often. But it's not really transferred because it's on the ship. How do we transfer the ownership of the oil? We have other documents, whether it are letters of credit or other documents, I don't care. Okay, I do care, because what I said before, what a financial criminal does, he uses paper. So if I as a financial criminal yeah, that I would try to influence these documents. And what you see here is that at the beginning, it's a normal company which puts the oil on the ship. And if you look what's the difference in why are these lines like this, it's always the same amount because it's on the ship, but where it differs is on the money involved. And this money, I can tell you, this is really corresponding to what you see on the right-hand corner. This is the intraday prices of oil. What happened is, you see here the line, these are the prices at that moment. And there is at the end, of course, there's an oil refinery, there it's going to. And in the middle, we see an oil company in, let's say, some country where it's difficult to transfer money from, let's say, Tajikistan or a country like that. If you want to transfer money from that country, let's say to a secure country like the UK or the Netherlands, my bank will, I'll guarantee you that my bank will ask questions for those payments. But if these documents are behind it, they will not ask a question. And what did the criminal organization do here? They had two offshore companies. They had a normal company that bought the oil contract at one moment. They put two offshore companies in between. Then came the oil company, and at the end were again two offshore companies. So nobody could really see what was happening. And depending on what the price did, the oil company in, let's say, Tajikistan, that needed to transfer a lot of money, they were put at one moment in this chain of transactions. So at the end, they changed the papers. And what they did, they handed it over to their banks, and because it was a 30-day timeline, if they were 1 or 2 days late, it was no problem for the banks. It was also interbank transactions but they got the guarantee. Nobody asked a question because there was a big bank involved. If somebody, the one who brought us to this idea that this was going on, was somebody at a bank who really thought about, from the criminal perspective, why does always that company in Tajikistan can transfer so much money? And why do each time I see that they're at the highest level and at the moment afterwards it's at the lowest level? So it was really somebody thinking from the criminal perspective, using relevant data he had access to, and he said there must be something rotten in the state of. And those who saw the copycat or not copycat do understand that I'm a Shakespeare lover. So at each presentation there are at least 2 times I refer to Shakespeare. So who can make the difference? You can make, if you think like. I'm going to my last 5 minutes. What we do as DCPF, preventive forensics, the 4 of us, we are not commercial. We're retired, all 4 of us. But what we want to do is each time we write a lot of articles about how criminals can use companies who are not willing to be involved in criminal activities, but still they use them. So we are trying to help a little bit on that element of what's the unknowns. And I can't tell you, but what I can do is help you in thinking like that criminal. Last week I did put an article on LinkedIn, sanctions and prevention that as a company you do not play a role in it. That I said in the article, I said I will not use it here, so I will not do it. But this is not on oil, this is on gas. And if this morning we had somebody here, which was a company involved in milk, grains, and things like that, that I can use these companies also, similar as I did on oil. So what I did in the last 40 minutes, sorry, I only could give you a sneak preview. I could not give you a lot of examples. Did you really think that that case of the telephone company, that the money really went from the first company to the second to the third? I can tell you it was not. There was a factoring company in between. There was a factory company in between, yeah, that was a daughter of a stock company. And not like in that case, the first stock company was in England. The other the stock company related to the factoring company was related in Canada. And with help of our American colleagues, you can't find it there anymore. So I could only give you a very small sneak preview into cases. What I hope that you do different tomorrow, and maybe you can start telling your partner tonight when you come home, and she asks you, what did you do today? Except from meeting a lot of people, that you say, I learned to think like a criminal, but I did it for a good cause. Then always everybody says to me, but in these lectures and these kind of things you write, I think you make criminals smarter. They are even one step ahead each time. And I heard it this morning already, also from a lot of people who said it to me, but they are always one step ahead. Yes, they are. They always are. But we are more. We know our own businesses. So like that guy with the oil company or the guy with the LNG, he knew what was normal. The guys at HP, they should have seen that there was something strange here. Why does a company aspire buy these servers and transport them over there? So you know your company. So don't ask me what the new criminal activities be. Know your own business and look from the perspective of the criminal. We have partners to help us. And of course, Sanders can help you. Yeah, but we can also help each other. We try to help with writing articles and things like that. And if you're still convinced that your company is not involved, challenge us. And most important, we don't want to get involved. Yes, and then the last half minute, and AI. I'm not so fond of all the ideas that we use AI. And we really think that of course it can help us. But do you think that the criminals don't use AI? That they already look at what is everybody looking at? What is everybody using? Be aware that AI gets its information from what we put into it. Don't we use digital information? You heard before from the girl from the bank how much information they had at Rabobank. No, we should use data, but not really focusing so much on AI, but start thinking about what's relevant data. What's data that can help us to find out that we are involved in criminality. So my idea is, and what I always try to tell everybody, think like a criminal. If you know how a criminal acts, at that moment you start looking, what data do I have? What data do I have to verify or to falsify? Because we should not forget that we should also falsify. And maybe missing data is very important. You know what, in the LNG case, was the reason why I'm convinced that there is something wrong? The fact that there is a special tanker, LNG tanker, which is capable of going there in the Siberian Sea, that where the biggest facility for Russia is there, which is owned by somebody on the sanctions list. Yeah, that tanker, almost every week, it has disappeared. It puts his tracker off. So missing data can also be very important. Sorry, I'm 2 minutes over my time. But if there are questions and you're, I'm always free, and otherwise you can find Ton and me afterwards.
Diego, impressive story. I have to think like a criminal. It's completely
yeah.
but I'll do
Tell
my
your
best.
wife tonight.
I won't.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
And we're now on to a third break actually, till 3:45. Then we're back here for the last presentations. Thanks all, and looking forward to see you back again.